Okay, we're about to start. I want to thank everyone for coming to our event here. Tomorrow will be the national. Can't get my words out. Tomorrow, the district will allow non-citizen voting, and so we want to gather here today to bring light to that. And I'm going to have three people that are going to be with me afterwards. Christian Adams, he's president and general counsel of the Public Interest Legal Foundation, will speak. Hogan Gidley, vice chair of the Election Integrity America First Policy Institute, will speak next. And last will be Ken Cuccinelli, president of the Election Transparency Initiative. You know, I want to talk to you all about an issue that is at the very heart of our democracy and the importance of having only U.S. citizens vote in our elections. Voting is one of the fundamental rights we have as American citizens. It is the cornerstone of our democracy and the foundation upon which our country was built. But the right to vote is not absolute. It is reserved exclusively for U.S. citizens, and for good reason. Our elections must always be fair, transparent, and reflective of the will of the American people. Allowing non-citizens to vote undermines the integrity of our elections and dilutes the power of our votes as citizens. It opens the door to potential fraud and foreign interference. As a nation of immigrants, we understand the value of diversity and inclusion, but when it comes to our elections, we must maintain a clear and unambiguous standard. Only U.S. citizens have the right to vote. We understand that there are many people in our community who are not citizens, but who are contributing members of our society. We respect and value their contributions, but we believe that granting them the right to vote undermines the very principle of our democracy. Citizenship is not just a legal status. It is a commitment to our country and to the values that make us a free and prosperous nation. Granting voting rights to non-citizens would dilute the importance of citizenship and weaken the fabric of our democracy. There are 6 fundamental problems with allowing citizens to vote. The first one is lack of legal standing, and Christian Adams will speak with us on that. Non-citizens are not entitled to the same rights and privileges as citizens. Voting is a fundamental right that is granted only to citizens who have met certain legal requirements, such as residency and age. Allowing non-citizens to vote would undermine the integrity of the electoral process and violate the principle of equal treatment under the law. It's a dilution of the citizen's vote. Allowing non-citizens to vote would dilute the power of the citizen vote. Citizenship is a privilege that comes with responsibilities and obligations, such as paying taxes and serving on juries. Citizens who have fulfilled these duties should have a greater say in the direction of their community and country than those who have not. Third, immigration status. Non-citizens have not undergone the same rigorous standards and vigorous vetting process as citizens. Allowing them to vote would create a situation where individuals who have not been fully vetted would be able to influence the political process. This could be particularly problematic if non-citizens have illegal or questionable immigration status. 4, protection of national interest. Elections at all levels of government have significant impacts on national interests, including foreign policy, national security, and economic stability. Allowing non-citizens to vote would be an affront to the interest of the country and could potentially put the security and safety of citizens at risk. 5, complexity and confusion. Allowing non-citizens to vote would add a level of complexity and confusion to the electoral process. It would require new systems and procedures to be put in place to verify the eligibility of non-citizens, which could lead to errors and confusion at polling places. This could ultimately undermine the integrity and accuracy of the electoral process. And finally, 6, unfair advantage. Allowing non-citizens to vote could give certain candidates and political parties an unfair advantage. If non-citizens are concentrated in certain areas, this could create a voting bloc that could sway elections in favor of certain candidates or parties, even if they do not reflect the views of the citizen population. You know, one of the arguments that is often used to me to allow non-citizens to vote, especially those with green cards who are here legally, is that they pay taxes, they're contributing to society, their children are going to our schools. And the argument that I always used against that is, you know, I'm here in Washington, D.C. I live in St. Louis, Missouri. We're staying at a hotel in Chinatown. We had a nice dinner at the restaurant. We paid hotel and we paid restaurant taxes. Does that mean that I'm automatically should be allowed to vote in the District of Columbia? I think not. Let us remember the importance of the right to vote and the importance of ensuring that only U.S. citizens exercise that right. Let's work together to protect our democracy and safeguard the integrity of our elections by only allowing citizens to vote in our elections. Next, I'd like to bring up Christian Adams. He's President and General Counsel of the Public Interest Legal Foundation.
Thank you very much, Chris. My name again is Christian Adams, President of the Public Interest Legal Foundation. I also happen to be a commissioner, presidential appointee on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, which is a federal independent agency. While I don't speak for the entire commission, I can tell you that my view is this is a civil rights issue. It's a civil rights issue because the rights of non-citizens to vote has the effect of hurting the civil rights of African Americans or Black Americans in the United States. I know this because we are currently in litigation with the City of New York representing 4 Black plaintiffs because of the effects on the right to vote of Black citizens in the United States by bringing in foreign nationals to vote in American elections. What does it do? It dilutes the vote of Black citizens. Whenever foreign nationals are allowed to vote in city elections in New York, it hurts Black Americans' ability to elect candidates of choice, and that's why we're bringing lawsuits under the Voting Rights Act against that law. You saw this play out in real time in California. In California, for the last 25 years, foreign nationals in California have slowly eroded the political clout of Black Americans in Los Angeles, where Black Americans have lost council seats because non-citizens are being counted for legislative districts within California city government, within county government in California. And now we're at the point in Los Angeles where there's no Black representation because of the presence of counting these non-citizens in the process. So I think it's a civil rights issue. There are real victims to non-citizen voting, and unfortunately those victims are usually the ones whose ancestors fought hardest and longest for the right to vote and under the 15th Amendment. So that's why Public Interest Legal Foundation is fighting. We just filed a brief also in California on behalf of a board member, Ken Blackwell, in San Francisco, about the dilutive effects of allowing non-citizens to vote on the voting cloud of Black Americans. So thank you.
And next, we will have Hogan Gidley. He's Vice Chair of Election Integrity, for the American First Policy Institute.
Thank you all. Chris, thank you very much. One of the things that I think we all work for in this room, the people speaking at this dais, is to help make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. This bill would actually do the exact opposite here in Washington, D.C. We work to protect every single day the rights of the citizens of this country, and we want to make sure that every legal vote and every legal voter are protected. And American citizens should be the only ones who get to vote in American elections. Clearly, some on the left do not think very highly of American citizenship, otherwise they would afford it the respect it deserves. In 2014, a man named Samuel Swift Perez sought asylum in the United States from socialist-controlled Venezuela. 8 years later, he stood before a judge in Kansas City, Missouri, raised his right hand, took the sacred oath of citizenship. His wife was with him, and she had tears in her eyes, and Samuel celebrated the culmination of years of hard work towards this incredible moment. And he said, quote, "This ceremony means the beginning of a new life. It's actually some kind of relief to finally feel as a citizen because for immigrants, you actually are a temporary resident and then a permanent resident, but you still feel a little limited. But now I feel very, very good, and I'm very, very happy. And he's not alone. Every year, more than 1 million immigrants from all over the world experience the reward of their dedication in ceremonies just like Samuel's. So many people work so hard for so long and faithfully follow the law because the prospect of citizenship is precious and it is priceless. American citizenship has an important meaning and is worth pursuing, which is precisely why millions of people do it every single year. American citizens get to determine who represents them in government and who will stand for their ideas, ideals, values, and of course their freedoms. Millions of people understand that and have literally risked their lives to be just a small part of it. One of the greatest responsibilities Americans have is to participate in our representative government by exercising our ability to vote. As an American citizen, casting a ballot is a civic duty and a unique privilege. For naturalized citizens, this is a reward after tireless years of work, patience, and dedication to put into the process of becoming an actual citizen of this country. Sadly, some on the left diminish and disrespect this hard work of naturalized citizens by expanding the privilege to vote in American elections to non-Americans. By doing so, they denigrate years of struggle that naturalized citizens go through just simply to achieve political power. They use words like equity and voting rights as a ruse to cover raw political desires. But in reality, the left is attempting to give unfair preference to individuals who have not made an effort or made the sacrifices to obtain American citizenship. This is absolute lunacy. Non-Americans should not be allowed to vote in American elections, period. Only American citizens should have that right. Does the government of Mexico allow non-Mexican citizens to vote in its elections? How about France, Germany? Of course not. They wouldn't, nor should they. What this bill does, though, is way more problematic than just that. This bill would allow an employee of the Chinese government, someone here in this country paid to be here by Communist China, the right to vote in American elections. The same would apply for those who inhabit the embassy of Iraq, for example. And I remember the same left and the same media who told us Russia interference in our elections would be a bad thing, and they were right, it is. That same media is now telling it's okay for Russian citizens to vote in American elections. Only among DC elites would this be controversial at all. Just about anywhere outside the Beltway, away from the myopic bureaucrats, the American people understand this in massive majorities. 70% of Americans in this country believe only American citizens should vote in American elections. I'm going to end with a quote from Kim Blackwell, someone I work with who is the chair of the Center for Election Integrity at the America First Policy Institute, was a former Secretary of State in Ohio, and is black. He said, in reference to a law in California, citizenship should mean something. By allowing foreigners to vote in San Francisco, for example, in their school board elections, the city is not only undermining the notion of citizenship, but also diluting the voting power of black Americans. We cannot let citizenship cease to mean anything. Black Americans have fought too hard for citizenship and the right to vote to see it diminished, end quote. Again, American citizens should be the only ones who get to vote in American elections. This is not controversial, it's common sense. Thank you.
Before I turn it over to Ken, I think I can speak for all of our respective organizations to say that we are pro-legal immigration. We are for immigrants, and we just feel that you should become a citizen first before you have those benefits. I also want to say that we have done many polls over the last 3 or 4 years, and you have some of the polling in your press packets. But this is an issue that is overwhelmingly supported by Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals, white, black, Hispanic, all across the board in our polling. People are against allowing non-citizens to vote in our elections. Next, I want to bring up Ken Cuccinelli. He's president of the Election Transparency Initiative.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to participate. I appreciate much of what Hogan said as a segue for my comments. A number of years ago, in 2019, I had the honor of leading a government agency called the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. This is the agency with 20,000 employees that manages and assists those attempting to come into the United States as legal immigrants. It is the legal immigration agency. And I got in that role the great honor of swearing in new American citizens. And I can tell you, for those watching and listening, if you have never been to one of those ceremonies and you were born here and you sort of won life's lottery as an American citizen, I would highly recommend you attend one of those ceremonies. You will realize how much you take for granted, for one, and two, you will appreciate the path that the folks who come here and play by the rules go through to become Americans and join the American family. It is, it's emotional, it's meaningful, and there are reasons for that, because citizenship is extremely valuable. And citizenship in the greatest country in the history of the world is more valuable than anywhere else. And to see the government of the District of Columbia, the nation's capital, ignore that, water down the value of that citizenship, and open the doors, frankly, to making us a laughing stock amongst our enemies who come now vote in D.C. elections starting tomorrow is a sad day indeed. But that day is not yet here. The U.S. Senate has one more day in which they can overturn, because the Congress oversees the District of Columbia, this terrible decision by the District of Columbia government. They can't say that they don't interfere in home rule. Just within the last week, 2/3 of the Democrat caucus in the Senate voted to overturn the outrageous elimination of criminal penalties by the District of Columbia. So they're literally only days removed from another terrible decision by the District of Columbia government. It is amazing to me that they will zero in on criminals, which I appreciate, but ignore not only illegal aliens, non-citizens, but literally the employees of our enemy nations, Russia, China, etc., who can now vote, unless the U.S. Senate overturns it tomorrow, in D.C. elections. It is truly, truly appalling. And while this has happened in other parts of the country, you heard Christian Adams talk about the great work that PILFA is doing in various parts of the country, both coasts. New York, L.A., San Francisco, there are places around the country that are attempting to do this, to water down the meaning of citizenship. But there is only one nation's capital, and Congress has the ability to stop this. The House has done so, and now it stands on the Senate's responsibility to do that. And you heard Chris Arps mention the polling. I'll call out, coincidentally, just one state, Montana, where the impact on citizens who can vote in Montana's opinion of their elected leaders is 4-1, more than 4-1 against, meaning they are more likely to vote against, say, a U.S. senator who supports illegals voting in D.C. elections than they are to vote to support that person. This has real impact. You've heard described by the other speakers in various parts of the country. That is getting worse, or at least that's the attempt on the part of the left. but it is completely out of line with the American people. Ordinary Americans, when you tell them this, they think it's initially a joke. Surely this isn't happening anywhere. It is interesting that it really takes pretty radically liberal left-wing cities to do this. Nonetheless, it is an ongoing battle across our country right now, and it behooves the Senate, the U.S. Senate, to stop this in the nation's capital. And we call on them to do exactly that. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's the end of the remarks for our speakers. If you guys could come up, if anybody has some questions, we'd like to take a few questions. None? We answered everything. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Appreciate it.
I actually have a question.
Sure.
Since the Senate doesn't take action,
Right.
Does DC have the ability to implement this? And if they don't take action, if the Senate doesn't take action tomorrow, could the Congress take action later?
So the Constitution gives the Congress authority over the federal district, the District of Columbia. So at any time, they could come in and flip this. They can alter or take over the District of Columbia's lawmaking authority. So the answer is they can come in later and do that. You heard comments about the voter rolls earlier, and I would note that one of the biggest consistent problems in all 50 states and the District of Columbia are unclean voter rolls. Keeping voter rolls up to date, keeping them accurate, keeping legal voters in and keeping not legal voters, which includes just people who've moved away, out. This makes that much more difficult. Those whose job it is to undertake this will tell you that it comes with some expense, and DC is going to have logistical challenges implementing this. But they're putting it on the books if the U.S. Senate doesn't act, and then it's only a question of money, manpower, and time. Thank you.
May I add to that? You brought up a very interesting point, and I think you hit on the voter roll cleanup, which is a big issue in this country. 88% of the people in America want clean and accurate voter rolls. They don't have it. At the Center for Election Integrity, we took a look at the top 100 most populated counties in the country and in the 14 swing states, and we compared the number of voters who voted to the number of ballots that were counted, which should match. They don't match anywhere. They're not even close. That doesn't necessarily mean anything other than to say it's a one-for-one proposition. You don't go into a bank and give them $100 and then the deposit slip come back and say 50 or 150. It should be dollar for dollar. The same thing applies to a vote and a cast ballot. This bill would make that way more difficult to track. When you throw another log on the fire, the 5 million we know about people in this country illegally and unlawfully, the left pushing for photo identification requirements to not be allowed. Here in D.C., you're experiencing a lot of the same issue, and then again, another issue they're going to face when you allow people who aren't American citizens to vote in American elections. It becomes exorbitantly more difficult to track that, to allow the elected officials to follow the laws on the books at all, and it makes for a big mess that will take years, if not decades, to clean up.